proud to be sponsored by Diamond Bright, the car care products that have been keeping the furious fleet looking their best for a long time already. To find all you need to keep your car clean and protected, follow the link below to diamondbright.co.uk. Hello and welcome to Furious Driving, and today I'm at the wheel of a car rarer than almost any Ferrari, but worth, sadly, about as much as a wheel nut from one. However, in terms of historical significance, this Bulgarian-built Maestro is one of the most unusual and rare cars on British roads. Ah, a Bulgarian Maestro, I hear you say? That must be one of those Ledbury kit car things. And I'll reply, no, it's not actually, it's an Apple 2000, which is even rarer. And if you like reviews of interesting and unusual different cars, then please do hit like and most definitely subscribe. And check out some of the older unusual car reviews we have on here as well. Now on with the review. So a little bit of backstory for you as to where all this came from. In the early 90s, around 1994, Project Enterprise was a plan to take the now aging and soon to be retired Maestro and start building it in other countries around the world. India was mooted, but Bulgaria was settled on. And a town called Varna on the Black Sea coast was picked because it had easy sea trade routes, so that until they could get the complete knockdown kits starting to be actually pressed and manufactured locally, they could ship in the parts with ease. So, in January 1994, the working party sent out there to the old Varmo factory were faced with a derelict site and an empty factory that had, been producing forklift trucks for the whole of the Eastern Bloc before the fall of the Iron Curtain. They now had a derelict site to build a purpose-built new factory. So they started building the factory in late 1994, and things went astonishingly well and close to plan. So by June 1995, they were actually able to start production of cars. But it was a full factory. They were building knockdown kits sent over from the UK. They had a paint facility, a trim shop, final finish, PDI. It was a full factory, effectively, putting the cars together. Under the name Rodacar, it was 51% Rover and 49% Daku, a Bulgarian company who already imported BMWs to Bulgaria. But it was a severe learning curve for the British. They had to learn how the Bulgarians worked and thought and get around those different working practices to make everything happen. But they ultimately did. They succeeded. And a lot of their staff were young graduates, were really excited and keen to have a career in car production. And so quality was turning out to be as good, if not better, than UK-built cars, which was phenomenal for a completely new factory, although there was experience to the forklift trucks of manufacture. So all looked good, everything was coming up Millhouse, and the factory was officially opened on the 8th of September 1995, ready to go into full production and start making these things to flood Bulgaria and the Eastern European market. However, three things went wrong. I just said four things. Three things went wrong. First of all, unusually for British Leyland and the Rover Group, complacency got in the way and managers not understanding, well, the market they were selling to and the sales and marketing strategy, really. So that was falling on its backside before things really got started. Secondly, Skoda happened. The Felicia occurred. Suddenly, it was on the market with a more modern product that was undercutting this by significant margin, partly because the government were offering Skoda, now part of the Volkswagen Group, significant import tariff cuts, effectively cutting the overall price customers had to pay, at the same time as reneging on a promise to cut tax on imported parts to build these things until such time as they could be produced locally, which was the long-term goal. The final nail in the coffin was when a key member of the Rodacar management team was killed in a car accident, and he was the only one with significant close ties to the Bulgarian government, who was able to grease the wheels and keep things moving along as they should. And suddenly they didn't have that significant tie to government. Everything fell apart. And by mid-1996, the project was over. That was that. The Bulgarian Maestro was no more. It's kind of a mystery that, considering they had a brand new state-of-the-art factory, a keen and trained workforce, they didn't parachute a different product in there. Land Rover could have flooded the Eastern European market with Defenders at that point, but no, they just mothballed it. And today, the site is now equivalent of a Bulgarian B&Q. It's a shopping centre, which is a real shame. So, in the meantime though, they had built 2,200 left-hand drive Maestros, all built to exactly the same spec, the only difference being the colours, of which there are about 5 to choose from, none of them metallic, one of them red. They were loosely based on the Clubman spec, so a 1.3 litre A-Series Plus engine, 14-inch steel wheels, steel bumpers, non-metallic paints, and of course an interior with none of the frills. What was missing from the Clubman spec was the option of a sunroof or a Perkins Prima diesel engine. You didn't get either of those even thought of if you're buying a Bulgarian version. As I say, they built about 2,200 of them, and the question really is, because the record keeping was fairly non-existent, how many of those went to customers, how many were actually completed, how many were just shells they started welding together. Anyway, there was a lot of product left over. A company called Parkway Services in Ledbury, hence the name the Ledbury Maestros, bought 621 incomplete Maestros as basically kit form cars, and then using bulk ordered parts from Rover Group, converted them to right-hand drive. From left-hand drive to right-hand drive, you couldn't tell the difference, but because they were built from bits and pieces, they didn't have catalytic converters apparently, and they're registered as kit cars, which means on your MOT today, you don't need an emissions test on them, which is interesting. It might load your insurance a little bit as well. However, at the time, they were the UK's cheapest car at £4,995. They got a lot of traction on things like Top Gear and other sort of motoring magazines, just for being a bit of an oddity. A car that was already out of date was still being built, but now in a shed in Ledbury. But that's not what we're talking about today. This car is the Apple 2000 car. Apple, who are based in Culford near Bury St Edmunds, bought a smaller number, about 300 and something, basically half of the Ledburys, of completed left-hand drive cars. Now, some of these they sold as left-hand drive cars to people with holiday homes, for example, who wanted something to leave over on the continent, and that was ideal for them, a bargain brand new car they could park over at their holiday home. The majority of them were, though, converted to right-hand drive. So, like Ledbury, they were busy buying up Rover's stock of right-hand drive dashboards, pedal boxes, and anything else they needed. The big difference between the Apples and the Ledburys, though, was that the Apples didn't bother converting the wipers. We've still got left-hand drive wipers, and we had left-hand drive mirrors, and you might be asking what that is. It's the actual glass. The lens of the glass is weird and confusing and magnifies all wrong if you're sitting in the wrong seat, which I hadn't realised before. But because these were completed cars, these had a Rover VIN plate on them, so they are classified as a real car, not a kit car. And if you look at the VIN plate on one of these, you'll find it starts SAXX. The Ledburys, although, have got handwritten, hand-scribed VIN plates under the bonnet. Another curiosity about these things is that although they were registered between 1998 and 2000, they're all on an N plate, and the majority of them, like this one, are N, then 3 numbers, then DRP. There must have been a big batch of spare number plates that the DVLA had to get rid of, perhaps. Who knows? So let's talk about the car itself, the Apple 2000 Maestro. A lot of people have commented in the past that these are actually better built than the Cowley cars because, well, it was a brand new factory, and although there were undoubtedly been teething troubles, they were trying very hard to prove they could do it well. And of course, having been built once, it went back to a second factory where it was rebuilt again. So it has been gone through very thoroughly from the outset. The spec is quite painfully low. Manual windows, of course. No sunroof, no air conditioning. We do have power brakes, which are acceptable. It's a 1300cc A+ engine running on a carburettor with a choke in, well, the borderline of the 21st century. Other oddities are things like the gearbox. It is a 5-speed, but it's from the van, so the ratios are kind of all wrong. When you hit cruising speed, you really need a 6th or possibly a 7th gear to go up into. And you might be noticing how heavily we're rolling at the moment. That's because, although the diesel wasn't offered, we have got the suspension from the diesel model, which rides incredibly high without the weight of a diesel in it, it has to be said. This, though, is due to the market it was going into. Bulgaria in the 1990s was an ex-Soviet bloc country, Iron Curtain, and things were more basic, more crude over there at the time, even cruder than Birmingham. So the roads were rough and potholed, and servicing and maintenance was going to be difficult, so they wanted a simple basic engine that could be fixed with 2 spanners and a rock and a lump of wood, hence the A-series, hence the carburettor. That's familiar technology which is easy to keep going. The road surface is absolutely appalling, so 14-inch steel wheels and tall, tough suspension, and they didn't really have motorways and dual carriageways to speak of over there, so the lower gearing was ideal for the kind of roads it was going to be driving. So in fact, although it seems odd to British eyes to see the spec, it actually worked very well indeed for the market it was going into. So although they were a little complacent with their marketing strategy, the product was ideal. Right, let's pull over and have a look around the outside and the interior. So, it's only when you know all these differences exist that you look at this car and realise what it is. The raised ride height, for example. I'm not sure if it would have had this Austin grille on the front originally or not. It should have just been badged either Maestro or Rover at this point, as far as we know. But because they were using off-the-shelf store and even scrapyard parts, who knows what it would have had from new. The fact it had 14-inch steel wheels, the basic colour, the no sunroof, all these clues tell us when we see this car out and about that in fact we're looking at something incredibly rare and special and a bit different, and not just an old Maestro. Not just the engine itself, but also the lack of sound deadening in the bonnet. You know we're in the Bulgarian car. But everything else does still look so much the same. It's all under the skin and little details. They're coming around the back, there's more clues, the steel bumpers, the lack of a Rover badge on the left, just Maestro on the right. But there are little curiosities like the Austin Rover logo here moulded into the lights. It's a really, really fascinating thing to look around and explore. So let's take a look around the interior of the thing. So standard doors, standard door handles, everything is completely normal. We have got very, very 1990s fabric on the door cards and on the seats. It's light grey with a lighter contrast, and then this oh-so-90s turquoise and a bit of red and a bit of orange. Again, lots of colours here in the fabric. Speaker down the bottom, wind-up windows, manual mirrors, nothing fancy here, electric. This driver's side mirror still has the original passenger side glass in it, so we do get a slightly different to normal view, but the owner tells me it works very well. Big door pocket, and curiously a spare little cubby hole down here as well, so oddments, keys, chocolate bars, they can all live in there. Now don't be off put by the curious water stains on the seats. Those are due to this leaking quite badly. It's got new door rubbers in it now, but when the owner got it, it was leaking quite a lot apparently, so these seats do need to be cleaned and maybe repaired a little bit, but that's all on the cards to happen soon enough. Stepping inside, they are very comfortable seats actually. Almost a bucket seat, but a bit wide, if that makes sense, but very comfortable nonetheless. Now, this is the later type dashboard. If you've seen my old Maestro video, we mentioned the fact that the first cars had a multi-layer moulding, which cracked and squeaked and was generally a bad idea. So they updated it in later cars to have a one-piece moulding, which did none of those things. It does, however, have an awesome tea shelf. I mean, look at this cup stowage availability. We can put as many mugs of tea on there as we want. I'm going to say that's a 7-cup tea shelf, which is impressive in any language. Moving to the right, we have got a few cracks up here after many years in the sun. And inside the later style squared off binnacle, we've got our gauges here, speedometer reading up to 110, nearly 88,000 miles in this one, interestingly. All our warning lights, a fuel gauge and a temperature gauge, so not a lot really. We have got a digital clock, exciting times. We've got our 4 push buttons for rear fog, rear heated lights, rear wiper and rear wash, all there at finger's depth distance from the steering wheel. Great design. On the right hand side, a little vent for the window and a tiny cubby hole for putting your Smurfs from the petrol station when you've collected them. Steering wheel, nothing changes from what we'd expect. It's a kind of a rubberized plastic affair. It looks like it should have a horn in the center under its Maestro badge, but that is just a badge. We've got our hazard warning lights up here and a little light up peg coming out the top of the steering column. And to the left we have our indicators and light controls, and of course our horn. Excited puppy that's just done a wet on the carpet parb. Wow! On the right hand side, same kind of rotating dial for the wipers and squishy squish for the wash. Underneath that we've got a coin slot, because apparently coin slots were very important and everything in the 90s had a coin slot. And down here, really surprisingly, we've got a choke, an actual manual choke on a car this late on. Can you believe that? Back in the centre, 2 big air vents, 3 little dials, 4 French hens and a Pioneer radio. Underneath that, an enormous ashtray. But where, oh where, is the lighter? The lighter is up here, hiding behind the indicator stalk. Beautiful bit of layout there, Austin Rover. And another random cubby hole. If you bought a double Bounty and then broke it in half, that would stow in there perfectly. Anyway, I digress. A small pen stowage tray that's just too small for a pen. 5-speed gearbox, mentioned that on the road already. Big chunky handbrake. Little blanking plates to remind you that you could have had 4 electric windows if you'd gone for the VP model, but you didn't. And someone has screwed a little litter bin down the back. That's really quite fun. Now, I think I mentioned this in the previous Maestro video that the headroom on these cars is phenomenal. Or it's really good. The headlining is actually missing from this car right now because it was going very droopy indeed, and even the backing wasn't that good because of that water leak. So that's on the cards to be replaced fairly soon. We have got the look-through type headrests, but let's have a quick look through into the back. Okay, so the door material is the same as the front and of course as the seats. Same wind-up windows, plastic, everything, and we've got a little pop-out ashtray, which is really cool. So much fun. Such fun. On the back of the seats, they look like they should have handy elasticated pockets, but they haven't. You have got more blanking plates to show where you could have had gubbins, but you didn't. But the Bulgarian cars didn't get any electric windows on any of them because it's basically a Clubman. You do have 3 rear seat belts, 2 of them inertia reel, 3 points, 1 of them a lap belt, and you have got fold down seats as well, so good times. Sitting in the back of the car, it's actually really quite comfortable. Even sitting on the hump, I've got decent headroom above me, which is great. And it always was a big, comfortable interior on the Maestro, so not a bad car to base an export model on. Now, exploring the bootle area, another strong point of the Maestro, it is a great big boot, which is always good. As I say, you do have the fold down seat, 60-40 split, which is a good thing. This is missing its parcel shelf, unfortunately, but interesting how the spare wheel is kind of partitioned off from this area here at the back. So if you've got, as we have here, tools and spares and bits and pieces, you can have them in their own little section, like a complete extra pocket underneath the carpet. Very handy indeed. As boot access goes, it's good and bad. It's very tall, very wide, but you do have this cut out for the lights, which could have been added to the tailgate, but wasn't, which means putting big wide things in does become a bit tricky, although we do have these wheel well cutouts anyway, so maybe they thought of that when they were building it. I imagine they're quite clever at that kind of thing. This car has got 88,000 miles on it, and it does drive like a very tall, bouncy Maestro, but a really good one. There's less sound deadening than you would expect, so I can hear rattling and I keep thinking there's a door open, and I've stopped to check a couple of times, but there isn't. So it drives basically like a slightly taller Maestro 1.3. The engine is revvy and eager as they always are. It's not drastically quick, but feels quick enough, and the steering is insanely light and about 4,000 turns lock to lock. The thing rolls through the corners like a ship taken on water. And it lollops and jumps over little crests and bumps, but the ride is not too uncontrolled. It's actually quite decent, really. It does give you a sense of confidence that the car is going where you're pointing it, and it will do what you want to do. It feels basic but good. That was the thing about Rover and the Austin Rover group before it. They never had two buttons to rub together, but they had great chassis engineers. They could pull the magic together when it counted. And handling was where it counted, for them anyway. The 5-speed gearbox is a little rubbery and agricultural pulling through. And the clutch is really very heavy indeed. But it's a lot of fun to drive. This isn't the owner's everyday car, it's a car he was vaguely aware of, and when he saw one for sale, kind of had to have it. It's only had a couple of owners in its entire life. The last owner but one had it for over 15 years and really did maintain it well himself, just cosmetically let things go a little bit. But that is all stuff that the current owner will be addressing as we go along. Mechanically, it's absolutely perfect. I would love to give you some actual specs and figures, but because it was all Bulgarian spec, with different gearboxes, different ratios, I couldn't tell you what the 0 to 60 is or the top speed. It's got a 110 mile an hour speedometer, so I'm guessing top speed's in the mid-90s. Oh man, that's a lot of turns lock to lock. Ordinarily, lack of air conditioning might not be an issue, but in the current heat wave, here's something I do miss from a modern car. Now, with only 2,200 built, 621 Ledburys, of which there are very few left, and only half of that of Apple 2000s, the surviving numbers of these cars, it's negligible. No one really knows, because a lot of people who've got them don't know what they've got. Most of them were scrapped just as old Maestros when they started getting ropey and weren't worth anything. So even the owners' clubs and forums don't really know. We're probably looking at barely double figures of Apple 2000s. So I am very lucky indeed to be driving one today. Wow. You can feel like, it feels like you're driving a rally car the way it leans to the corners but manages to grip surprisingly well. Right, thank you for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed this ride out in this incredible rarity. There's got to be barely double figures of these left in existence now. So I'm pretty honoured to be driving one, so thank you so much to the owner for letting me out in it today. If you've enjoyed this, please, as always, like and subscribe and join me again next time driving something completely different.